Hey guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's episode is all about remote medical coding, what you should know. If you are brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue, I'm a medical coder. Okay guys, so I often find myself in this space of having to answer this question to people who already have their heart set on this career field, but they only want to do it remotely. And when you're brand new, on top of all of these things, especially if you come from a background of medical, or even if you don't come from a background of medical, there's still an enormous amount of challenges that new medical coders come up against. And then if you're adding on the remoteness of being by yourself and trying to figure this stuff out, that makes it 10 times worse. Now, a lot of places have gone back to the office, and there's a lot of that now, okay? Because during the pandemic was when all the coders went home, and regardless of if you had experience or not, they were willing to hire people because they still need coders. At the end of the day, they still needed coders. And so they were okay with people working from home then. But before then, if you did not have any experience at all in coding, you were never going to get in at home, okay? And that was just the way that the industry was set up. The industry is very rigid when it comes to the way that they want things, and a lot of these employers and things like that. And it is very difficult because of the complexity of what we do to find people, okay? And then at that, everybody wants experience, but how are you supposed to get experience if no one wants to hire and do all the training? So I mean, I've talked about this so much, but I do want to say this, that if you're getting into this because you insist on working remotely, I cannot stop you. I cannot, and I'm not even going to try. But what I am going to tell you is what you should expect if you are insisting on working remotely as a brand new medical coder, and you insist on this because of whatever reason, XYZ. I don't want to know. I don't care to know. Okay, you can have all the reasons that you want to, but what I will say is this: when you are working remotely, you better be on your A game when it comes to research, because even though you're new, and how are you supposed to understand this, you're going to have to figure that out because you're insisting on working remotely. Somebody who has experience already in the industry is better suited for working at home because they know how to troubleshoot issues with the electronic health record. They know how to do their research if they get stuck on a claim, or they get stuck on an encounter. They know how to find things. And oftentimes new people don't even know how to formulate the question. I know, because sometimes in the beginning, I didn't even know how to formulate the question. I knew I had a question, if that makes any sense, but I didn't know how to formulate the question. And being in person really did help, okay? But being remote is you are at home. You are at home in your home office, and your computer screen is facing a wall so that no one can walk up behind you and look at your screen. If you have young children in your house, and you have teenagers and they could just walk up behind you and look at your screen, that's a HIPAA violation. People have gotten mad at me because I say that. Guys, if anyone does not have a need to know, and they look at your screen and there's private protected health information up, that is a HIPAA violation. And so that is just knowing the rules, and that's understanding the law. Like, you can't be out here willy-nilly letting people see all of that information. Okay? You have to protect it at all times. So hopefully if you are going to insist on working at home, have your screen or screens backed up to a wall so no one can walk up behind you, right? Position your desk in a way that only you can get behind it and be able to see your work area. I seen somebody on LinkedIn so proud of herself and posted her home office, but it was in her living room, and her computer screen was facing the living room. And I told her she needed to turn her monitors so that no one can walk up behind her. She got upset. Doesn't matter to me. you're the one who's about to violate HIPAA. I'm just trying to prevent that from happening. Okay. So you have to treat working at home like you would if you were going to the office. So they do expect you to be on time. They do expect you to have good internet connectivity, because you can't be saying, oh, I can't connect to the internet. I can't connect to the internet. Because if you have a problem connecting to the internet, that means you can't work at home. Okay. So you have to have good connection to the internet. It's got to be stable. You can't be out here traveling all willy-nilly, because that's what people think too, is that, oh, if I work remotely, I can work from anywhere and I can travel and I can do all these things. Some facilities, if you heard me, I said some, okay, some facilities will require you to be within a certain radius of the main campus, okay? And if you are not, and if they catch you, which they do know how to do that, because IT people who work for remote companies, they know how to track where people are, okay? And if they find out that you are out there traveling around willy-nilly and you're not connected to a secure connection or whatever the case may be, even if you're connected to the VPN, again, you still need to have a stable internet connection. That's grounds for termination. You don't want to get into a job only to lose it because you think you can get away with whatever you think you can get away with. Or, well, I'm just going to leave my computer on and I'm going to use a little mouse mover so that I can run out and do errands and go pick up my kids and go do this and do that real quick and I'll come right back. You're stealing company time then. That's stealing company time. And you can get fired for that. Okay? Now, again, I'm not trying to scare you all, but what I am trying to do is give you the reality. Now, your boss may allow you to step out real quick if you need to do something, it's an emergency or whatever, and you let them know. They may say, okay, yeah, sure, but don't expect to do that every time, because then it's going to be like, what are we paying you for? We're not paying you to do your errands. We're paying you to work. And when coders are paid to work at home, they're expected to produce. The thing about working remotely is because of the lack of distraction and the lack of having to commute and things like that, the productivity is often higher for people who are working remotely, because they say, okay, well, you're in your own home office, so that means you're going to be working and you shouldn't have any distractions. You have no coworkers to bother you, which, I mean, you can still talk to each other by messenger, but that's the thing. So just one of those things that you have to be aware of. You may be required to do more. And even if you're brand new, that's still not going to matter, because you're the one who wants to work remotely right out of the gate. This is what is going to be there. This is what you're coming up against. Okay. And the troubleshooting for some of these issues that happen, it's not always going to be the most clear-cut thing for somebody who's brand new, who's possibly never worked in an electronic health record before. And so it's better when you have somebody in person to explain these things to you. You can go through these things. Now, sometimes some employers will say, we're going to train you for 3 months on site and then you can work remotely. Even that would make me feel better for brand new people, is to work someplace for a little bit and then get sent home, because that would mean that you would get exposure to other coders. You would get exposure to the providers, because again, working remotely, these providers are not going to see you. You will be a faceless voice on email. They will just get emails from you. And if you have not gone and introduced yourself, if they have not seen you or met you, it can make querying a little bit more difficult with those providers. I talked about this a couple weeks ago about having to query providers and things. Some facilities have somebody else who does all the queries, but for the most part, you need to expect to be the one to have to do the queries. Okay. Again, some facilities are very protective of sending out queries because they're afraid of the providers, and so they only have one person do it. And that person may not even do it because they're afraid of the provider. But again, you can't be fearful, because you have the knowledge that those providers need. And the providers are not meant to be coders. And regardless of whatever they think, they may not fully understand all of the rules. They may know some of the rules, but they may not know all of them. And having to communicate with somebody who is not there and who may not always be putting the email in a good tone, because sometimes people don't know how to do tone in an email. And sometimes people will say, oh, I'm so sorry. I don't mean to bother you. I don't mean to disturb. I'm going to get irritated with that. Because first of all, you should never be apologizing for helping a provider. That's number one. Number two, you're not bothering them if you're letting them know, hey, there's a problem. Something's going wrong. They need to get paid. They want to get paid. And you are the one with the knowledge that will help them to get paid. So don't ever, ever apologize for reaching out or trying to give them education or something. So that's why I say, even if you are working remotely and your hospital is in the area, you need to make it a point to go over there and introduce yourself first before you start sending anything by email. Because if they start getting messages from somebody that they don't know, even if it's a remote medical code, they're not going to care. They're going to get upset. They're going to tell their clinic administrator. The clinic administrator is going to say, don't be sending messages, whatever the case may be. Things can go from 0 to 60 real quick with miscommunication when you're working remotely. But if you're out of the area, there's no way to actually go in and physically go see the providers, then you need to make it a point to do a Teams meeting or something, whatever virtual communication that you're using to work with those providers. You need to make it a point to do that so they can see your face, so you can introduce yourself or get in on their meetings. Sometimes providers have a morning huddle, and if you can manage to get yourself, in there virtually and say, just wanted to say hello, and I'm your new coder, and I'm going to be sending out some education tidbits, or if y'all have any questions, I can address those. And coming in with that kind of energy, that would be a lot better than somebody who's, we never hear from our coders, they're remote. Because I've had providers who have left and said, this sucks, Blue. We don't see our coders at all, and so. And I said, do they even reach out? She's like, well, no, they're remote, and they don't even reach out. They just let me know when I'm on the bad list. And that's not good either, because again, you all need to know that you wouldn't want somebody to reach out to you only when you're doing something wrong. So remote medical coders have that added challenge of, now we've got to be really good writers. We have to be able to communicate effectively using the written word. And there's a lot of people who will tell me, I don't like to write. It doesn't matter what you like or what you don't like. You need to get used to it. And plus, there's plenty of programs that can help you to write well. Grammarly is not an ad for Grammarly, but even I use Grammarly. Grammarly is freaking awesome, okay? And it catches all those things. And, sometimes you just have to use it to kind of like, okay, does this sound right? Or what about the tone? You know what I mean? And it will let you know. And so that's something that obviously you don't ever want to put in protected health information, but if it's just a general email about education, you can certainly run it through something like Grammarly. So that way you can make sure that it sounds right before you send it. Okay. But that's just something that I want to say there, is that that's part of remote medical coding too. You have to have really good writing skills, so that way you can communicate effectively using the written word. Okay. And they're not going to dread your emails, because they know you're going to get right down to business. Okay. And like I said, hopefully you're in an area that you can work closely to the facility, so that way you can go in and stop in and say hello. And even if it's just to introduce yourself, and then maybe once a quarter, just stop on in and just say hello and ask if they have any questions, or try to join one of their meetings, just to see if they have any questions. And sometimes, it's just a good way of keeping good rapport with a provider that you don't see on a daily basis. Okay. But like I said, when you work remotely, that's one of the challenges you're going to have. The other challenges you're going to face is it's lonely. Gosh, when it was the pandemic, oh my gosh, when it was the pandemic, and I am so used to the noise of the clinic because I have an office that's embedded in the clinic. And, I'm used to, like, hearing the noise in the hallway and the, hey, I have a question. And so when I was at home for 5 miserable months during the pandemic, I was like, oh my gosh, it was bothering me so bad that I had to leave, like, the TV on so that way I could have just a noise because I could not work. It was so quiet in my house. And so I had to have noise in order for me to be able to concentrate because that's what I got so used to. And it's incredibly lonely because you're by yourself all the time. And for some people, that may seem like a dream come true, especially if they have coworkers that present a challenge, but it's not always the greatest thing in the world. And as it is, human beings are losing our connection to other human beings because everything is computerized, everything is virtual, everything is, on the internet, anything you could ever want. You don't even have to go to the grocery store anymore. You don't even have to make a phone call. You can just send an email. And that's making us lose our people skills and our communication skills. It really is. It's impacting our ability to be able to do that. It's like when I do these videos and I talk about, working remotely and things, or when I talk about, like, doing an in-person interview for a job, and I tell the people, you got to do a good handshake, good firm handshake. You would not believe the amount of freaking emails I get afterward from people panicking because they say they don't know how to do a handshake. Well, what is too soft? What is, what, I don't understand what a dead fish handshake. You just say what the, I don't like that. I can't stand that. If you're going to shake somebody's hand, shake somebody's hand. Don't do this dead fish handshake. It's just so stupid, But I get people that get confused about that, and again, that comes from not being around people, or they get very shy. They don't want to talk to people. That's an easy fix. If you are going to the grocery store, you don't have to always order it. It doesn't always have to be delivered to your house. You can take the time to go to the grocery store to help you to work on your people skills. Say hello to the cashier. Say good morning, when you see the person behind the counter. Carry on just a general quick conversation. It's not anything in depth, but it will help you with your communication skills. And again, working remotely, you don't want to have to lose all that, because if you do that long enough, it gets to be very difficult to build relationships with people and communicate in person because you're so used to being by yourself. You don't need to be that way, And so a lot of people will disagree with me. It's okay. It's okay for us to disagree. We can agree to disagree when it comes to my advice to you as a brand new medical coder, not to work at home remotely right out of the gate. You can eventually work at home, but I'm saying for your sake, for your education, for coding, is to work at a place where you have to physically go. And if they do on-site training for a few months and then they send you home, that's even better. But I'm telling you, working right out of the gate at home, you're going to be missing out on a lot of things that can help you grow as a coder. Okay. And so that's just something that you guys got to understand when it comes to this. I'm not telling you these things just to make it up and just to give y'all a hard time, because there's plenty of people in the industry that are selling the career field of medical coding based on, oh, you can work remotely. They have been doing that since I first started 17 years ago. They were saying that. But why would you push that unless you're trying to push a program? Because that's not all of what coding is. Coding is not only working remotely. It is working with the records, working with the providers, to make sure that they understand what's going on. And then if they need education about new codes and things like that, they're not getting educated by somebody that they don't know who this is, because they're more likely to ignore that person. Right? So, but keeping everything secure is very important. dressing up like you're going to the office, even though you're at home and no one can see you, is also very important. A lot of people will disagree with me on that. I shouldn't have to get in a full face of makeup, and I shouldn't have to, get dressed because I'm sitting here, working at my desk, and I just want to be comfortable. You can be comfortable, but still get dressed up, because again, that's your brain working like, hey, this is work time. Okay. So it's only to help you to stay productive if you do that. If you don't want to do that, if you don't want to take my advice, you don't have to. You don't have to. Okay? Because if you know everything, then by all means, you go right ahead. You go right ahead. I'm just trying to help you with proven things that have helped people over the years, and especially those that work remotely. Because I have worked remotely outside of the pandemic. A few years before that, I worked for a level 1 trauma hospital at home. I worked in the evening, and everybody's working during the daytime, and I just happened to be working in the evening. So I was catching all of the stuff that was left over that everybody else had picked over, and I got to work on all the hard stuff in the evening. Well, it also made me a stronger coder because of it. So I fear nothing when it comes to coding because of that experience. But again, I had years of experience already when I started doing that. Okay. And no, I could not get to the providers. That really irritated me. Those, anything that had to be queried had to go through the nurse. And I didn't think that was right either, because it's not up to the nurse. I'm not querying the nurse, I'm querying the provider. But that everybody has their policy and they want to make sure. And okay, I'm a coder and I understand. I know what I'm doing, but whatever, what are you going to do, So just something that you ought to know. You have to be a good writer. You have to be able to write well so that people understand what you're saying. You have to stay disciplined in order to get up on time, get, logged in, start working, stay working. Don't get distracted by whatever's going on in your house. Everything can be seen as far as mouse movements and length of time that you spend in a record. Everything is time stamped. Every single page that you go to when you're in a record, in somebody's record, is going to be time stamped down to the second that you were in there. And so if you are in an easy record and it shows that you were in there for an hour, okay, what were you doing? That's not unheard of for them to do an audit and pull that time to see, okay, what were you doing during this time? So it's not so easy as you think to be working at home remotely and then staying motivated. That is a challenge. I'm just saying. So with that said, whatever you choose to do, just know this. The most important thing is to protect those records at all times. The most important thing is to be in a stationary spot, because these employers will ask you what is the address of where you're going to be located with the company equipment. Okay. The other thing that is very important is to maintain those relationships with your providers, even though you are remote. If you can go to the facility because you're in the area, only because you're in the area, then by all means, I hope that you make that a regular visit. If you are out of the area, make sure that you at least do an initial meet and greet over, Zoom or Teams or whatever they use, so that way they can know who you are and that you're there to support them. It's at least that's just my advice anyway. So with that said, I hope you all will consider, if you're brand new, at least consider working on site first. So that way, if you have questions, you can ask another medical coder. You can get exposure to the providers and understand what it's like to work with them, because that is a whole different ball of wax too. I'm just saying. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Best of luck to you out there, and I will see y'all again next time. Bye.